Hi there, welcome to the channel and welcome back if you're a return viewer. You're watching the Christchurch Review of Books YouTube channel and I'm Kerry. Today, with a heavy heart, I have to say, a book from Charles Stross, one of my favourite authors of the last decade or so, usually totally reliable. This is one that I didn't really get into or feel much enjoyment with. This is Dead Lies Dreaming. Now, this is the first of the so-called New Management series written by Stross, which is itself a spin-off from the Laundry Files series, which he's been writing for about the last decade. There are 9 novels in the Laundry Files series and a number of shorter works that make it up. New Management basically leads on from the later Laundry Files books where, I hope this isn't a massive spoiler, the Laundry, which is the name for a initially secret UK secret agency which deals with horrors from beyond Earth, eldritch terrors from the Lovecraftian sense, and they're all breaking through into our reality because of the increase in computational devices. In this universe, magic is a form of mathematics, and with all the computers and whatever around, it's making these creatures' life easier and easier to come through and take over Earth. And in the later Laundry File books, the Laundry basically fails in its task, and an ancient god, I think they call him the Black Pharaoh, from my readings of H.P. Lovecraft about 30 years ago, I believe it may be the entity known as Nyarlathotep. I'll probably ruin the pronunciation on that. Anyway, he has taken over the UK and has installed himself as Prime Minister. I'm not sure why a god needs to hold a ceremonial office, but it seems Stross thought it was an amusing idea. And the New Management is the name of the new government which has taken over the UK, and times have changed. And Stross wrote himself a little bit into the corner in the later Laundry Files books. There's all sorts of things popping into existence: superpowers, magic elves, all sorts of arcane and occult things were coming through into the modern world, and people had to deal with it. In the New Management books, we've moved on a few years apparently, and all this supernatural stuff has become commonplace. Every second person seems to have secret powers or superpowers, and people just seem to be going on with their normal life, which seems a little unusual. Anyway, into that world there is a team of young people, disparate young people each with special abilities. They're referred to as the Lost Boys later on in the book. Of course, a reference to Peter Pan, and of course there is a lot of references to Peter Pan in this book. I'm not sure what Stross was trying to play out. He's kind of one of the main characters has an ambition to make a sci-fi version of Peter Pan. There's a character called Wendy Deer. There's a tinkling voice in the ear like Tinkerbell. All sorts of Peter Pan references. I guess Stross thought it was a great joke, and good for him. Now, the Lost Boys are a kind of gang of thieves who use their powers and to carry off audacious heists and robberies, and usually with some type of amusing ear to them. And Wendy Deer is a ex-cop who also has superpowers, and she gets tasked by her private security insurers to take down the Lost Boy gang. And meanwhile, the Lost Boys leader, Imp, real name Jeremy, gets tasked by his sister Eve, who works for a super gangster called Rupert Big, or Biggie, to find a magic book and deliver it to Mr. Big. This task brings all the characters together, and it's essentially a heist or caper type story. Just takes about 3/4 of the book to set up all the people into the right places and introduce all the characters. And then the actual heist or mission takes place in about the last 80 pages of the book. The Lost Boys are made up of Imp, like I said. He's seems to have an ambition to make films or something, but he's dirt poor. And there's Doc, which is kind of like an older man who is more experienced than the rest of them. There's the Deliberator, whose real name is Rebecca, who's a black lesbian. And then there's Game Boy, who's a trans woman. Or man, sorry. The clue was in the name. Anyway, they all get involved together with Wendy and Eve, and there's a number of minor characters as well. There's a figure known as the Bond, which is some type of agent hired by Rupert Big to clean things up if Eve goes wrong. And Eve has a bodyguard known as the Gammon, who basically protects her. And both the Bond and the Gammon have all sorts of super high-tech weaponry and whatever. And this leads to one of the problems I found with the book. A lot of the characters are written quite interchangeably. There's three women, there's Eve, Rebecca and Wendy, and they're all the same kind of stereotypical strong woman action hero like you see in movies these days. There's not very much differentiating, and I mean, I got confused between Wendy and Eve several parts of the book. And likewise the Gammon and the Bond, they're pretty much the same character, just with different motivations, and they basically blast their way through the action in the book, and there's not very much difference between them. As for the main plot, there seems to be a lot of ridiculous coincidences when you start out, but the Stross kind of explains all this away as that the magic book, which is the major MacGuffin of the story, is connected to Imp and Eve's family with a lot of history. And as the book goes on, we learn about parts of the history where they became acquainted with magic and all that type of thing. And it kind of bugs me that magic and sorcery and family histories of magic or whatever are somehow commonplace in this world. They just were not mentioned before. And there's some talk about in the book that magic went away after the 18th to 20th centuries or something because of some self-protection it was trying to do because of time travelers or something weird. It's not really fully explained. I'm sure it's probably going to be referred to in the next books. There are two more books in this series, The Quantum of Nightmares and Season of Skulls. I have not read those two yet, although I do possess them. Anyway, the main heist basically takes place in an old house, which just so happens to be the same place that the Lost Boys are squatting in. House used to belong to Imp and Eve's family, and they find a mysterious doorway in the house, which seems to be in an impossible place. Open it, explore the way through, and find like maze-like rooms, each from different eras of history, and they go all the way back through to the late 1800s. And as it so happens, the book that everyone's after is located in a library in this 1800s imagining of London. They say it's London as in a bad dream or something like that, because the family that used to live there, Imp and Eve's family, had powers over dreams and could create dreams and create portals to dreams and sustain them as free existing places or something. And like I said, the book is in this library in this construction of 1880s London, and the main task, the main caper, the main action is the Lost Boys and Wendy go through these portals to London, and then the Gammon and the Bond and a gang of Eastern Europeans or Russians or something who have some strange motivation for getting the book to go through. And there's all sorts of fights and chases and what have you, and then they also have to deal with the lower class Londoners they find in this dream 1880s and what have you. And this is the first book by Charles Stross since, I think, The Rapture of the Nerves, which was his co-writing adventure with Cory Doctorow, which hasn't really worked for me. He's usually, like I said earlier, he's usually a most reliable author for me, but this just didn't click for me for some reason. It just seems, it's super heightened, it's super cartoony. Like I said, all the magic and whatever being commonplace just didn't work properly for me. There are some good bits, there's some amusing sections where he gets a bit snarky or a bit jokey. He knows his hardware, he knows his computers and military hardware or guns and what have you. That can be interesting for some people. I just found it was just layered on a little too thick, a little too ridiculous. Probably was an experiment, I think, by the author to write a little more looser than the original Laundry Files books, a little more fun apparently, or what have you. Having said that, I do want to know what happens next, so maybe I don't hate it as much as I thought. Got the next 2 volumes, so I'll be reading those over the next few months probably. And as for this one, if you're a completist with the Laundry series, if you've read all those and you want to know what's going on in the new management era, you'll want to read this. If you're a Stross completist, you'll want to read this. If you haven't read the Laundry stories, the Laundry series stories, I would advise you to read those first perhaps. It probably puts a more solid footing on the events, and the Laundry Files stories are have one foot firmly in our reality as we see it. This is kind of, like I said, it's hyped up, heightened, amped up a bit, and probably not a good place to start. Okay, I think I've made myself clear about that. Not a book that worked 100% for me. Okay, we'll see you next time. I hope you enjoyed the video, and have a good day.